Okay, hello, Mr. Keshmirian. My name is Matt, and today we're gonna have an enterprise with you, and I'm gonna say we are too proud and glad to have you here.
Thanks very much. It's nice to be here.
Okay, I just have some questions here, and I'm gonna ask. Okay, are you ready to start?
Sure. Yeah, let's start.
Okay, so my first question is this. May you please present us a brief biography from yourself, like place of birth, university you have studied, and like this.
Sure. So a brief biography about me. So I was born in Iran, 1983. I was born in Tehran.
Oh,
and
good.
my family came to the United States when I was 2 years old. And so we moved to Texas, Austin, Texas, and
Good.
I was there until I was about 10 years old, and then from there we moved to Wisconsin and then to California. And I grew up in near San Francisco, California.
Right.
And let's see, what did I do? I went to college. I studied computer science at a school called UC San Diego, the University of California down in San Diego.
Cool.
And I got my undergraduate in computer science there. And then got my graduate school. I did my master's program in computer science also. And
which year?
I studied computer science. I finished my undergraduate in 2005. And then started graduate school, and then I graduated graduate school in about 2008. And my hobbies when I was in graduate school, so I studied computer graphics, but I have a big interest in photography.
Right.
So I worked for the school newspaper and lots of different things. And I think it was around 2008 when the iPhone came out in the United States.
Oh, right. Good.
And me and a bunch of my computer science school friends, we thought it might be neat to start building applications for the iPhone, and we started making different types of games and little apps and things like that. And I found two friends who were working on a game that looked really cool, where you were rescuing some sheep from some aliens, and you have to build defenses, make a tower defense game.
Right.
And I joined their team, and the three of us built our first game in about 6 months. And we called it Tower Madness, and we put it up on the App Store, and the game was really successful, and it did really well. So we decided we'd start making games make a little company and start making games. So we started making more games, and started growing the team and started hiring people. In 2011, we made a game called Zombie Gunship, where you're shooting zombies from an airplane. And that game was very successful. It became the #1 grossing game on the App Store. And kept going from there and kept growing and got the team a bit bigger, and we built larger and larger games. And by 2017, I think we're about 35 people with about 65 million players around the world in about 88 countries. Yeah, so big operation there. And then we did a bunch of games in virtual reality and augmented reality with AR Kit, and the virtual reality stuff was with Oculus on the Oculus Go headset.
But just by yourself, or you do work with other companies?
No, we just did it all inside our own company. So with our team I think that game, the virtual reality game, had a team I think of about 7 people, and the augmented reality team was about 5 people. And then we built some other big games, Zombie Gunship Survival, and that game was about 32 people worked on that one.
Very good.
And then by the end of last year, we really started to think about virtual reality and augmented reality being very interesting. So we thought we'd start a new company, and we called it Xtality. And now what we're doing is we're working on virtual reality and augmented reality for companies. So we're not making games; we're making what's called enterprise software.
Right.
So helping big companies with training and product visualization, and basically just working for businesses. And it's different from games, maybe a little bit less fun, but it's still it's really cool. And we've been growing that company. So I'm here today. I'm actually down in San Diego. This is where one of our offices are, and I live up in near San Francisco. So I come down here about once a month. It's about an hour away by plane.
Oh, good. Okay, so thank you for your descriptions, and so let's do the next question. My next question is this: what made you interested to be a game developer?
Yeah, I mean, I used to play a lot of games when I was little. So I played, Nintendo games and Super Nintendo games. And then as I got older, I started playing a lot of computer games. I think making games is something I really enjoyed because, well, first of all, I like playing games, but when I started making games, it was really nice to be able to build these worlds for players to go and experience and give people an escape from their everyday lives. I remember as a kid, I really remembered a lot of really big moments in games that I played, playing Zelda and playing Mario. I really remember those as an important part of my childhood, and I like to think that some of the kids that played my games growing up will remember those games in the same way.
Oh.
So yeah, I think that's part of it. It's just fun. I mean, you get to mix artistic pursuits, so drawing and 3D modeling and animation with programming and sound and music.
Right.
Working in a game company is really fun because you have lots of different kinds of people. So it's a really fun group to do projects with.
Yeah, very good. So, and how much useful was your field of study in the university for you as a game developer? How much did you use what you
it's a good
had
question.
learned?
At the beginning, when we were doing all the games ourselves, so we started the company with 3 people, and we didn't have anybody to help us, so we had to make the games ourselves. So we wrote our own games in C and C++. So that's stuff we learned in the university.
Right.
And for the computer graphics, the 3D stuff, we were using something called OpenGL. And writing OpenGL code to do the 3D part of it. And we made our own 3D engine. So you might have heard of Unity or Unreal, but these didn't exist when we made the company. So we had to write our own 3D engine, our own game engine. And so a lot of it was very important. So my education was super helpful. But now, kind of, as the company grew, I went from being at the beginning, a programmer, but and I did some of the artwork and stuff. I had some visual arts skills as well, using 3D Studio Max and other programs. But as the company grew, I became less of a programmer and more of a manager. And so, those skills changed over more to business skills. And it was still helpful though, because being a manager of a computer-based company, having a background in computers is really helpful because you can understand when certain things are hard or certain things are easy. You can make better decisions because you can understand, what's going on a lot better than if you had a business education or you studied art or something.
Yeah, I ask this because some people like Steve Jobs believe that it's not necessary to have a certification, to have a degree from university.
Yeah.
Do you agree with this, or you're not?
I think, well, it's funny because I think now that the internet is becoming such a good resource for learning, if you're very dedicated, it's possible to study everything on your own. And so there's a question of, does it, especially, I mean, in Iran, I don't know how it is in Iran, but in the United States, college is very expensive.
Yeah.
And so most people who go to university here end up, spending the next 10 years paying back their costs, their college tuition and everything. So it takes a long time to pay that back. You start the world of working with like gigantic debt to the banks. And so if you can avoid going to college, in some ways, some people are starting to say, maybe it's not worth the money to not to go to college. Sometimes you can just study everything on your own. But I think the reality is that for a lot of people, being in a classroom setting is the best place to learn. And also having a chance to work with other people is really important. Having the community that a college provides. So, I think while sometimes the skills themselves are easy to get on the internet, I think the experience of going to the university is an important one. And I think it teaches more than just what you learn in the classes.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So, next question is this. As a game developer, could you talk about the traits and opportunities of the US job market, and does existing big companies of game developing was a problem for you, or it was difficulty?
For us being a developer, do you mean? Like as a small company, was it hard to work with big companies? Or?
You're a small company and you're new, and there are a lot of big and old companies in the United States. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, when we started making mobile games, there weren't that many companies doing it, so we were one of the first. But as we sort of as the market progressed and we had large companies, you know, sometimes it was our small company of 30, 35 people against huge companies with 200 people, 300 people. So, you know, it's tough to say. I think I've seen a lot of really small teams survive. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of, there's benefits to being small. So I've seen these teams of like 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people do really well making games, because the reality is that you don't need to make that much money in order for that team to survive. When you have a team of 300 people, the cost of running a 300-person company is really high. So if you have one game that fails, you might not have business anymore. And the investment required to build a game, and if you have 300 people, you're looking at spending $30 million to build a game, when if you have 5 or 10 people, it might be less than $100,000. So I think the challenge is, you know, what kind of game are you trying to build, and building the right game for your team size. So, you know, small teams that have a really good idea that's very small, it doesn't have a lot of art, doesn't have a lot of levels, where they can make a small but really fun game. I've seen them do super duper well. So I think it's, the challenge is, you know, if you try to make a gigantic open world RPG with a huge, you know, amount of art and everything with 3 people, you're either going to take so long that you'll never finish, or you know, you're going to have a lot of competition from the big teams. But if you make a really cute, small, unique puzzle game, things like that, we've seen a lot of mobile games that were made by a few people that did really well. I mean, some of them are like Temple Run, Crossy Road, any of the Nimblebit games. There's just tons and tons of tiny games. Even some famous games like Monument Valley didn't have a very big team. I think they had less than 20 people. So there's no reason to say, yeah, you have to be a 200-person company. I've talked to some of the big companies. The problem is, you know, I think for people working in those large companies, it's also really hard, because they get really far from the product and they only have one tiny little piece. You know, you become like button engineer number 3 instead of having a chance to really impact the whole big game, and having a chance to have your thing.
So you mean it's up to people to know what is suitable for them, for their group to make, and it's not important how many people are you.
Yeah, exactly.
You mean
I think
that?
there's a good game for every team size. I think if you're one person, you can make a certain type of game really well, and if you're 300 people, you can make a certain type of game really well. I think, and it's important for people to understand, you know, what their skills are and build a game that makes sense for that skill set. I think I've seen teams where, you know, they have a lot of artists and a few engineers. You're going to make a game that's going to have a lot of art. If you have a team that doesn't have any artists but has a lot of engineers, they're going to make something that doesn't, you know, a card game or something that doesn't require a ton of artwork. So, you know, I think one of the most important things is to decide pretty early, based on your own team, what kind of game you should build.
Good, very good point. Okay, and could you tell me about parts of a team, like how many people and different fields you need to make a team, like an artist, a game developer, and, you know, economist or someone?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the kind of game you're building, but, you know, in general, small teams I've seen where there's 1 artist and 2 engineers works really well. And then as it gets larger, you start to see, you know, people like concept artists come in where they just do painting, figure out the look of the game, and then you have artists that build what the concept artists draw. The engineering team gets larger, and once the engineering team gets large enough, usually you want to have either an engineering manager, a producer, we call, which is like a project manager who looks over all the project, makes sure everybody's getting their tasks done, keeps the whole project on track, and has the big picture of what's going on. Other roles that we've hired, you know, you need to have a QA team as you get bigger, so people that are testing the code, and we handle things like, you know, merge requests and pull requests, and handling just like the code itself, making sure everything's tested with every version. We've always hired sound designers on a contract basis, so we bring sound designers for some part of the game, and then they kind of don't do anything, come back later on and add some stuff. So it's not a full-time job, but that's important for sound and music. Then you mentioned economy designers. If you're building a free-to-play game or something where there's a really big economy, I think it really helps to have a really good economy designer. And I think it's a tough thing to hire one, because economy designers are often very specialized. So depending on what type of game you're building, you know, is it an RPG, is it a card game, is it a puzzle game, is it a you know, battle royale shooter. Like it really depends. And usually they're very specialized in the types of games they're able to tune. But a really good one, they're very expensive. Here in the United States, you might pay them $200,000 a year. But some of the best ones are really, they make up that much money in terms of how well they do, and the value they add to the team, being able to decide on like how much should this thing cost in the game, how hard should this level be, how much should the in-game items cost, how difficult should this enemy be. They're really good at that kind of tuning and the economy balancing and everything, which, as you know, can be the difference between a game being a success or a failure. So for large companies, paying that much money for a person is very reasonable. Not something you do as a small team, though. I'm trying to think, what other roles do we have? So game designers are important too. The guys that like sort of figure out how the game should go and what the pieces of the game are. It's not about tuning, but really about the general initial idea of the game. Yeah, again, those are very specialized too. Some people are really good at building shooters, some people are good at building puzzle games, card games. So it depends on what kind of game you're building, what sort of people you hire.
Yes. So let's at the financial part. So how do you earn, and how much do you earn from this job as a game developer?
I mean, it depends. Sometimes,
for example,
you make
For example, when you develop a free game, how can you earn some money from that?
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S. On the iPhone App Store, we usually make most of our money through in-app purchases. So if your game is free, I mean, if your game is a paid game and you're charging $2 for it, then obviously you're making the money from the download. But most games these days are free, so we see most of our income coming from people buying coins and things like that, coins, weapons, stuff like that for real money. A lot of companies make some money from ads too, because you're going to have different types of players. Some players will never spend any money, but they're happy to watch ads, and some players hate ads and they're happy to spend money.
Yes.
And so, usually the ones that don't want to spend money are kids, and the ones that have more money than time, they're going to be adults. And so you want to try to have something for everybody. But yeah, I mean, successful games right now, something like Fortnite is making $10 million a day. I've never had a game that made anything close to that much money, but
Really?
I think successful games, you can see small indie teams. I've seen small teams making games that have made $1 million. It can happen. But usually, most games don't make that much money, I think. But they do make enough money for the developers to survive and make a good living and then continue making more games. So it's a tough business. I think there's sometimes you have hits, sometimes you lose money. It's hard to say. It really depends on what you're doing.
And how much do you yourself have income in 1 year, maybe?
For
1
me,
month?
it's been all over the place. I mean, sometimes it's the first few years of making the game company, it was zero. In the later stages of making the game company, we made sometimes personally we made a lot of money, like high 6 figures.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay, and let's talk about this. Have you met any Iranian people when you in your job, in your field of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of them. I think one of the most well-known ones is a guy named Chris Akaban, who runs, he's I think chief of revenue at Glue, which is one of the big studios here in San Francisco. There's a lot of running people in games, I think. Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny because, like when I first started this company and I told my parents I was going to make a mobile game company, my mom was like, "آرش داری چیکار می‌کنی؟ چرا می‌خوای شرکت بازی شروع کنی؟ این چی کاریه؟ مثلا برو برای مایکروسافت کار کن." And so, these kinds of things happen. Parents don't usually like video games in the Persian culture. So, my parents were very concerned that I was throwing my life away. But I think a lot of Iranians are very dedicated to the technical field, and they have computer science degrees, so or have become good engineers, that kind of thing. We have lots of engineers, Iranian engineers here, so it's not uncommon to see Iranians working in games. So lots of them.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. And do you have any other point for your last speech? And do you have any guidance
Yeah, I mean,
or something to suggest?
Sure. I mean, I think
for
I
us?
think games is a generally a really fun career,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a career where you can do lots of different things. So people that go and get into database programming, as a computer scientist, it's kind of all the same, right? But with games, you can do a lot of different things, and it's different every time. You're experiencing, you're learning about how do I make a missile fly and shoot something, and then the next day you're learning about how to make a boat float on the water, and the next day you're like, how do I make an airplane fly? How do I detect some kind of thing? You're always solving puzzles. It's lots of different kinds of engineering. Sometimes it's physics, sometimes it's math, sometimes it's graphics. And then there's a lot of artistic aspects to it too. It has to look good. You have to be creative. So I really enjoy doing games. It's just really a great feeling to have this impact on lives of people that play your game. Knowing that you're making their lives a little bit better, and you're touching so many people. And we've been really lucky to have had our games be played by so many people around the world. And so it's just always really cool to have people, they write us letters and then say, "Hey, I really love this game. Made my childhood really cool," or something. Lots of really exciting letters that we get from people. And so it's nice to know that we've touched people's lives in a really meaningful way.
Yes. So thank you so much. So for your information, for your guidance, and for laughing, do you have something to say in Persian for who watched this video?
Oh my gosh, in Persian.
You don't have to. Just if you can.
امیدوارم همتون بازی‌های خیلی خوبی درست کنین و خیلی موفق باشین. من خیلی برای من خوش گذشت که تو کارهای بازی درست کردن باشم و امیدوارم همتونم خیلی در این مورد خوشحال باشین.
خیلی ممنونم. متشکرم.
خواهش می‌کنم.
So thank you so much. It was a very great enterprise, and thank you. Have a good night.
Pleasure. You too. Thank you very much.
It was our pleasure. Good night.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.